Brad O'Leary, Managing Editor of FleetWatch magazine, in the studio with me today. I'm very privileged to have Craig Uren, a man who many of you will know in the industry. Craig has been with Isuzu Trucks for how many years, Craig?
A long time, Patrick.
For a long time.
20 years.
Yeah, and has been heading Isuzu Trucks in various capacities. But I love your title now. Senior Vice President, Revenue Generation, Southern African Customs Union, Isuzu Motors South Africa. How big is your business card?
Yeah, it's all virtual now. I don't have a piece of paper to show. But really, it just comes down to correctly describe, correctly position what you're trying to do, and focus.
Okay, so revenue generation.
Sales.
And is
nice,
sales. And that,
fancy word for sales.
Okay. It's always been your strong point, and you're very in touch with the dealers and with the customers. You've always been very close and come up with some innovative ideas over the years. But Craig, the times have changed, from the old days when you entered, what was it, Truckeneer. Times have changed. That was very innovative. And we've got a whole different world. Now, I attended a press conference the other day where you were talking about this different world. You started off by saying the global transport is in crisis. How do you see that? Why is it in crisis?
Yeah, look, I think you just look around us, trying to get parts, commodities shipped from one part of the world to the other that you took for granted up until 2020, 21. It's not a given. It's not an easy thing. When you do get it, it costs you a substantial amount of money more. Freight costs on shipping is part of the Barney world I spoke about is inconceivable. It's had such an impact on our business. Simply just flying, whether you're flying internationally again now or domestically, it's a bit of a logistical exercise. You don't just take it for granted. It's not a given. No. It has its challenges. So again, you're navigating things that were just run of the mill. You didn't give it two thoughts. You grab your bag and you go out the door, and you expect to be somewhere a few hours later or the next day. Yeah. You got to give it some thought. And you got to do quite a bit more planning. It's not just something you can do like we used to.
And of course, the past couple of years have seen massive challenges add to your supply chain challenges. Namely, you had to work your way through COVID. There was total lockdowns. There was a massive supply chain congestion built up. And, of course, massive shortage of semiconductors due to plants in China and all over the world. The suppliers of those closing down during the COVID pandemic. I just don't know how you managed to get through all that and still produce good figures, which we'll come to just now. But how did you manage those crises, Craig?
Yeah, it's easy to reflect on it, Patrick, but at the time it was hugely challenging. I think probably the biggest lesson I ever learned was in 2011 when Japan had the tsunami.
Yes.
And the supply chain got switched off.
Yeah.
For a good 6 months. And we had to make a plan and we had to work our way through that. So, I think communicating with your dealers, your customers, and trying best to explain the situation. And, there's so much you can do. You control the controllables, the cliche, and those variables as best you can. What's out of your hands, you've as they say in Afrikaans, you maak 'n plan. When you work around it.
Greg, one of your compatriots, if I may call him that, MD in another company, said that in 2020 they had a lot of stock but no customers, and in 2021 they had a lot of customers and no stock. Did you find that with the supply chain? That was all due to the supply chain congestion and challenges.
Yes, I guess. COVID switched. You had we call it a sausage machine. We're in a business of very long lead times. We're already planning July, August, September production already in detail by model, by derivative. So when you have a pipeline like that, and COVID shuts you down, you can't just switch the pipeline off.
Yeah.
So you end up, everything that was bound for us coming in March, April, May, June, it was coming, so you had to do something with it. And when you referred to there were no customers, well, we were in lockdown. So you can't just switch that off. Then we're dealing in 2021. You have customers and you can't get your supply going. So a complete dichotomies of situations, and it challenges your organizations and your ability to plan and plan. Lots of cliches we can talk about here. Plan.
And change a plan once a plan's made.
React and adjust your plans daily, weekly. And then you've got to second guess the world and the market. If you stop the supply chain, like in COVID, was there going to be a market, and who are we going to sell to? Was there life after COVID? There was, at that time, that debate.
Yes.
So but then we run complex supply chains with complex factories to build these things that are very high values. The commodity values, these are capital goods, so they cost a lot of money. You don't have endless resources to fund the cash flows, the working capital, build them, park them. You've got people's lives at stake which you employ in the factories to do the job for you. You've got to think the consequences of how you keep them employed, how you look after the livelihoods of the people around you. So whichever variable, 2020, 21, 22 was completely different. 23 is proving to be completely different again. So there's no real continuity. I mean, prior to 2020, the trends were our friend. It, to a certain extent, wasn't boring, but very predictable.
Yeah.
And you've heard me say the trucking industry for the last 20 years, the trend of the truck market is actually quite boring in its consistency and continuity of simply, it's not a growth sector, it's a replacement. All you see is trends slightly change, but the gross numbers very seldom fluctuate too much up to 30 or too far down, unless you have a shock like the 2008 and COVID, where it drops to 20,000. But in 12, 18 months, it's bounced back again.
What amazes me is that I feel very privileged to be associated with the trucking industry, because the resilience of this industry never ceases to supply me. And not supply me, and yes, supply me. When I go to the supermarkets, I am supplied. Those shelves are full. The trucks are out there working. Also, when you stand in your front, what I've always admired you, Craig, is you put the trucking industry in the overall world that we're living in. And I'll come back to that. But it's an industry that has tremendous optimism, doesn't give up. The word that we often use is resilience. And do you ever get tired of that resilience, we just got over COVID, then Ukraine and the Russian war starts up, and there's a whole new supply chain hassle there.
Yeah, look, it's fascinating, actually. I never get tired of it because, as you know, my background is economics. It's no more difficult than trying to understand how supply and demand is going to work out. And if you think about everything we've just discussed, COVID, no COVID, etc., it's managing supply and demand parameters. And I guess the closer you are to supply chains, the global impacts, who's got COVID where, in what country in the supply chain, the risk's logical.
Yeah.
And you got to watch and pay attention to the signals. And then it comes through, and you got to make calls on it and adjust accordingly. And then, as I say, you've got people to look after, you've got customers to look after, you've got dealers to look after. Everyone depends on you calling it right.
Yeah.
So you got to do your homework to call it right.
Yeah. Do you sleep at night?
Better lately, yes.
Better lately. You ain't getting much in those days. Yeah, Craig, because it's actually quite amazing that, I don't think a lot of customers realize the full supply chain, and certainly the public don't, and the government does not realize the role of trucking in South Africa. And I've always said that this is because it works. You guys seem to make it work through every crisis where you see other things collapsing. But I want to ask you now, how serious is it now for you? We've got another, it's been ongoing, but it seems to be bubbling up into the volcano starting to spill over with the Eskom load shedding, with the corruption, with the low growth economy, with unemployment, with poverty, with the equality gap, all those things that are hitting us on a daily basis. Is this bigger than COVID? What South Africa as an individual country is facing?
I would say yes, in the sense COVID, it was pretty definitive. Something, and if you look at, I've used the tsunami. I've used other, let's call it other global events. There's a single event that like COVID, shut you down for 2 months, and then you were back to trying to find normality.
Right.
Okay. The tsunami in those days was an event, and you had to then recover to normality. There weren't a whole lot of other variables at play. We're dealing with a multitude, is probably an understatement, in the magnitude of variables.
Yeah.
So in the trucking business, the supply and demand of product on the road, our challenge really is around mix and the right product, truck for the right price, and the operating cost for a trucker to stay in business, because all the variables we're dealing with now, again, the supply and demand issues, you look at the shelves in the UK for tomatoes and lettuce, there's none. Okay, you look at domestically, we've heard about chicken, and we're hearing about eggs, and we're hearing about other things that are happening. The whole supply and demand factor of all commodities is in turmoil. Now, in the transport industry, we've got to try and understand the impact of that.
Yeah.
And you've the cost inflation, the input costs, fertilizers, and the rain, the environment now, that's also playing a role in that. And is a poor old transporter, and the transporter talk about the crisis of transport in the world.
Yeah.
It's not a universal thing. It's a magnitude of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I spoke about sea, spoke about air, never mind, rail. Okay, let's not go there, because the pressure has been put on somewhere else, because that isn't working. That has huge other consequences. But if you just look around the consumer and food security, transport and the area we play with our customers and transporters has a huge role to try and morally uphold food security to keep those people in business. I mean, there's I can name them offhand, but I won't, where the whole business is at risk because they can't produce eggs, can't produce chickens, can't produce this, can't produce that. So at source, the cost pressure is pushed through the whole network. So, the consumer doesn't want to pay. It gets pushed back to, and if you watch any of the international shows like CNN, Sky, BBC, the farmers are saying, well, they're not, and it's happening here, they're not planting anything or not investing in anything because the cost exceeds what they're going to get for it. It's not good business to be losing money. So it impacts on the role transport plays in society. I'm touching on it, but it's quite significant in the impact in economics.
Craig, you mentioned that like the those different, the costs are too high to make it unsustainable for business. We've seen it in the transport industry, in the trucking industry. Masane Fufu with its curtain-sider division. The costs were just going through the roof, and it was unsustainable. The rates couldn't keep up with it. So we've seen that happen quite a bit in the transport industry. Gay Transport also closed its doors after many, many years. And when I read it, like Astral Foods, the biggest chicken supplier, they couldn't supply chicken on the bone to Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so a number of Kentucky Fried Chicken stores had to close, according to reports. And that was due to load shedding that they lost, I think it was 124 million, Astral Foods, in 1 year. But that affects transport as well. And people don't realize that when the chicken can't be delivered, there's a transporter who did deliver it who's taking a knock. So all these side shows, if I might put it, without being flippant, has an effect on trucking, and then has an effect on you selling trucks.
Yeah, look, I was clearing out some information. We got to move offices soon, so I'm trying to clear out some of the clutter. And I pulled out a presentation we did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I looked at the core content of that, and we were talking about the cost pressures on the industry. And cost is not a new phenomenon in business.
Yeah.
It's the dynamics of those costs we're dealing with now. And, these type of pressures South Africans have been, I won't say immune to, they've been well schooled in how to handle them. If I look at what's happening around the world with inflation and other costs in developed territories, they've never experienced the level of this challenge yet. And I think we're probably dealing with it better because we're well schooled in it in this country, because we've had no choice. And that's part of the resilience. And the level of innovation and the level of skills to work around things. I see things every week that amazes me. Well done to those people, whether they've, temporarily taken the pain, but know that they've got a solution. I guess farmers, this is not new to a farmer. Yeah. He knows how to manage hard times and the fluctuations of crops and the elements. So it is, your question was, it's challenging times, and we've got a lot to do to keep the economy going and everyone in the game. And our role is, how do we play a role in making sure we provide sustainable solutions to our transport customers, whether it's now the emerging market trying to find employment, creating their own employment. I think, you can look around, and most discussions are around, how do you solve the unemployment issue?
Yeah.
It's not about big corporates only creating jobs. The informal sector, the small, medium businesses is and will be the biggest employer of people. And they are the ones that have the biggest challenge to start businesses and get going. The funding, the credit in this country doesn't favor those little guys and the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I want to come in that and say, you said there just now, how do you play a role in this? And you have just introduced a product to play a role, to get newcomers into the industry, to help the smaller companies. And that is, I think it's Easy Go. It's a rental system that's off balance sheet, that will be attractive to newcomers. Well, it's going to bring newcomers into the trucking industry, but it's going to help existing businesses to actually transport their own. Tell us about that. That's where you play a role. What are the areas?
I think we're all pretty versed in the formal environment. But in the informal environment, where the opportunity for entrepreneurs to start a business, and everyone needs to transport their goods, irrespective of what they do. excluding services, but even services to a point need some type of. But that divide between the formal structures and the informal structures is quite huge.
It's massive.
It's a big divide. And we're trying to actively get closer and bridge that. It's not easy, and we're not saying we foolproof in getting to that, but we've got to make an effort. And yes, with the transformation and giving small businesses an opportunity, they generally get contracts with some level of revenue and cash flow behind it. And until they have a decent balance sheet, they're never going to afford transport, irrespective of whether it's a pickup or a truck. So we've got to find solutions. So we're really just trying to innovate where they can, based on their contract and their cash flow, rent a vehicle. And yeah, there's risk in that, but I think we're quite comfortable in our brand and our residual values. We can recycle our vehicles quite well if that comes to become an issue. But we've got to actively bridge the divide and give an opportunity for those small businesses to grow. Yeah. They're the future transporters and the next generation, possibly big customers, big transporters providing a service, but they all start somewhere.
Yeah, and Craig, it's interesting because what you've done there, I found very interesting, because sometimes people say, push out your transport, rent out your transport so that you can focus on your core function. But your motive behind this Easy Go, is it? It's Easy Go. Yes. Easy to go, Easy Go, is to actually bring newcomers into the transport business as well and train those guys up, and they will become bigger employers. They'll start growing and growing. And how does that contrast against, let me rent my transport out to Craig. He knows the transport. I'll carry on making chips or whatever.
Look, I think the philosophy we started more than 10 years ago, when we started the truck business as Isuzu and started to grow our place in the marketplace, we introduced and we launched the Truckaneer. Okay,
I remember
truck
that so
entrepreneur.
Well.
So for every truck you put on the road, I can't remember the exact numbers, but safe to say there's a good 10 people that get employed directly or indirectly.
Okay. For every truck.
For every truck you put on the road, there's the driver, the co-driver, the picker, the logistics guys, at point of departure and point of delivery. There's pickers, packers involved in that point. So, and I think at that time I said, if the truck market was 50,000 trucks sold, can you imagine the impact on the employment, on the knock-on
50
effect?
times.
So that's where Truckaneer came from, truck entrepreneurs. So all we're doing now in this day and age is adapting to what do the entrepreneurs now need in this environment, in this economy. It's still a principle of Truckaneer, but Easy Go is the easy way to get into your business and go, and helping find that type of solution. So that's the initiative, but it's still Truckaneering.
Yeah.
And yeah, people who are in business are not experts. They're not expert drivers. They're business people who are driving. We've used the term in the past. Two-pedal technology in an F-Series trucks was never seen or heard of before.
Yeah.
You're not an expert driver. You just need an accelerator and a brake and your wits about you to make sure you drive safely. And that's what we introduced. It still works for us. And the principle of the driver stroke merchandiser or traveling salesman is still the same. But you've got to make it easier for them. So easy to go. Careful how we say this.
Yeah,
but
easy to go.
This is a very common sense and logical business, and we need to apply as much of the common sense and logic as we can. to focus on what the need is in the marketplace.
Now, one of my questions on EasyGo is training, because you want to bring them into the transport industry, give them an easy entry into the transport industry, grow their business. But as you know, there's certain disciplines that will be applied to make a transport business successful, whether it's one truck or it's 100 trucks. Are you going to give these guys training in transport, everything that's involved in trucking?
Yeah, look.
Because it's not like renting a truck for a day.
No.
So you're actually bringing it in as part of your business.
It's not like the car business. You just pitch up and rent it.
Yeah.
You use it for 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years, but at the same time, if your business grows, you swap it out and you upgrade to a bigger one. So it's a journey. It's Isuzu's with you for the long run. And if we're starting at an infancy stage, we've got many customers today that started off like we're talking about now. They started small, they grew, and that partnership goes with you for a long period of time. And if our products, which we believe they do, provides really good returns, cost of operation, it makes you money. So we're in the business of making people money and selling vehicles that make you money. The car guys hate me when I say cars cost you money, but trucks make you money.
Yeah.
It's a perspective you need to have.
If you operate them correctly, which goes back to you didn't really answer that one in terms of, are you going to provide not just a truck, but some training behind the truck, transport training? Have you thought
Patrick,
of that?
it's actually a difficult one to answer. The easy answer should be yes. Okay. Each customer circumstance is different. We don't know where the market's going to actually come from. So how formal or informal that is. It could be tremendously informal where, from the principles of business, how to manage your cash, how to manage your bank accounts.
Exactly.
Quite honestly, it could get to that level, or it could just be, how to run his route smartly and how to make sure he's planning his fuel purchases and his loads properly. So not an easy one to answer, but we will do and we will try and do whatever it takes, because that's the partnership.
Yeah, and I just want to say that, it is a difficult one to answer because it's a new product that you're offering. It's a new concept that you're offering, just been introduced. So as you say, you don't know who's going to be taking it up and what level of training will be there. But to leave off on that one, I just encourage you to have a look at that training aspect, because that is going to, as you said, you're in for the long term. And guys who don't get trained, they just think, truck, is just taken for granted. The whole trucking industry in this country is taken for granted. And they're facing massive challenges. And to run it professionally in today's climate, changing climate, as you've said, as you said when you came in, since we spoke at the press conference, Craig said to me, the world's changed since then. That was about a week ago. And you're quite right. Everything changes. But I leave it at that one. On that. I think it's a great concept, by the way, that EasyGo. And that runs across the N series and the F series and the full range of trucks there. Craig, the focus on trucking, I've always said it needs a very focused approach. You split from cars, buckies, trucks, all that. When was it? 10 years ago? More?
Just more than 15 years ago.
I remember it was at Santon or somewhere like that where Isuzu Trucks came in. You took total focus on trucks. How's that been? Has it seen massive? Was the wisdom of that, has it come to fruition?
Look, no doubt it did. The first 5 years, as we know, were very formative years. Training, getting people to focus better, getting dealers and investors to invest in the right things with the right focus to create that base. And as you know, we've just celebrated 10 years of market leadership. It all comes from that change. And providing that structure and focus and making sure that that's what it's about and not being distracted. And I suppose that goes for anything, whether it's now with us as a overall brand, you've got to focus very specifically on pickups and the areas of pickups that are commercial versus leisure and lifestyle. The success is in understanding the mix and where the focus must lie. So your dealer organization we are not all things to everyone. We on truck focus on truck, on pickup leading off truck in the commercial aspect of those vehicles. And our dealers are structured in a way that they have commercial bias versus, let's call it typical retail consumer lifestyle leisure biased, and it's the mix of who focuses on what.
And the focus is important then, to be focused on. We said that trucking industry needs a focus. It's a different ballgame.
We've said, and we trucking is about after sales. After sales sells trucks.
Yes.
And that's we like, and I hear some of our staff correct each other. We're an after-sales based company that sells trucks.
I'm going to agree with you 100% there, because there's no bad trucks coming out of Europe, Japan. One or two out of others need a bit of work. But so the trucks are pretty much up there with each other. I said, what makes the difference when I go and I want to see a Hino and an Isuzu or a Mercedes or Fuso? What makes it different? It's got to be pretty hard, because the products are good now. You can't afford not to have a good product on the market.
Yeah, look, we make, and Isuzu's always prided itself in makes really reliable, durable products. With as you know, it's a diesel engine company at heart that makes these commercial products, and you've got to make sure you live up to and you support that level of reliability and durability. And at the end of the day, it comes down to cost. You can't afford these things to be breaking on you all the time. So you've got to have a robust parts business and support for them.
When people hear after sales is the most important thing, they think the trucks are breaking down all over the place. That's why you need a strong after sales and after service. That's not true. How do you define after sales when, because your warranty's gone for a long time now, how do you find after sales? I mean, normal parts and servicing, and then on the road breakdowns, which do happen. You're dealing with a diesel engine, mechanical things, they do happen.
I'm trying to think of the terminology. We're quite happy that the trucks don't break down.
Yep.
Because then you've got a very different problem. But when it does happen, you've got to be geared up to do it quickly. And many people make the comments, but it's really not about downtime. It's about maximizing uptime. And for every hour of the day, a truck is generating an income. It's generating revenue. And the after sales cliche is just your backstop to make sure you're maximizing customers' opportunity to be generating an income. And that's, generally our customers are buying it for those reasons that have been tried and tested in their eyes, from a reality.
And you've got that tried and tested in South Africa. You've got long roots in South Africa. And so you have tried it. You know the conditions here. I know one particular manufacturer battling with the conditions now, which they didn't know too good, and they're finding they a lot different to what they thought. But you've got that historical perspective, and you've got the roots firmly planted in South Africans' ground. Let's go to the amazing 2022 figures, in my opinion. I'm just going to read them for you. We hit in total performance in the truck, and it includes, correct me if I'm wrong, includes van and bus sales, but was 30,153 units sold for 2022. And the last time that was around that area was, where was it? It was 2014, was 31,509, but 2015 is more close to that figure, 30,441. Now, that followed 2 years. COVID was 22,736. Compare COVID 2 years later up to 30,153. Was that expected to reach that figure? It was such a good figure.
Look, it surprised me in the end, but I guess since we had that discussion at the media day, it shouldn't be surprising. You know, when customers have had to drive their trucks longer than normal through the 2020, 21, 22 period, you know, for various reasons. Business challenges, working capital, revenues that were down, consumer changes. So they've had to extend, which has delayed the replacements. But you know, you can delay replacements for a certain period of time, and in many instances, you know, the significant change in distribution with the online shopping. Has driven certain customers to have to fleet up, replace earlier, while some other customers who've lost track of the marketplace have had to gear down. So, you know, I guess it's not as surprising as I might have thought, but this supply chain void, if I can call that, in 21 and 22, it's surprising from the fact that there was that void, but you know, customers bought what they could. So we we didn't sell anywhere near as many as we'd like to because we didn't have the availability. But we, I think in our planning, tried to have the maximum minimum we can get to satisfy the marketplace, to keep a relatively large perspective of our customers in our products. And I think we'll see a little bit more of that in 2023. Not quite sure if, you know, that backlog has been satisfied now, whether it'll still remain at that level. But the extra heavy market, as long as the rail network doesn't work, the extra heavy segment has significant demand because those trucks are working very hard and doing a lot of mileage.
Especially in the side supermarket, and that's because of the commodities boom. And funny enough, there's another impact on the Ukraine war, the Russian-Ukraine war, which the gas has been supplied to Europe has been cut off, and they rejuvenating their coal plants. And South Africa is getting a boom in coal, but it's a lot of problems along with that, big hold-ups at Transnet and all that. But the side supermarket has gone through the roof, hasn't it?
It is, and if you drive around in the rural areas, you see the impact on that volume of trucks in areas you would hardly expect to see them, or historically we've never seen them there. But just taking a drive down the N1, N3, N2s,
everywhere.
The level of goods being moved on road, other than commodities like coal, is very significant as well. So
they reckon, the C-Track, they do the transport index, and they putting it at 84% of the goods South Africa are currently being moved on road, with a massive fall off of rail. Massive fall off.
So, you know, I did that trip a few weeks back, and, you know, it was kind of spot the car amongst the trucks. So it is significant.
Yeah, that's an N3 in particular. Everyone, they phone me and say, I've just been on the N3. The amount of trucks is staggering. And I do remember the days when we travelled during the day, and it was a handful of trucks. Trucks loaded and offloaded during the day and travelled at night. Now it's 24/7.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's informal, but someone who's been around a while, we're counting trucks through Laingsburg. It's the level of truck count going through Laingsburg is like never seen before either.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's...
And that brings me to, in fact, before I get to the other point, in these markets, you proudly announced, celebrates 10th year in the lead. And that's a hang of an achievement. Right, 10th year in the lead. I just want to read this. You achieved total sales of 3,304 units of the total market, excluding vans and buses. Record performance for the brand, which smashed the previous year's total by an increase of 4.7%. Medium commercial vehicle market increased 17.8%. Isuzu sales increased 10.12% compared to 2021. Heavy commercial vehicle market increased by 19.6%. Isuzu sales increased by 0.24% compared. So it's increases all over for Isuzu.
Yeah, increases are year on year under, as I said, the pressure of restricted supply.
Yes.
The market naturally was a bit more than what we were, but it comes down to planning how much is enough to keep ourselves from a market perspective. So we're grateful for that. In hindsight, in a lot of adversity, but really we've still got a lot of catching up to do to get back to the levels where we should be relative to the marketplace.
That's not only Isuzu, that's all manufacturers, isn't it? Catching up. There is still quite a catch up to do. I'm not talking about market position or anything. I mean, to catch up. And that's what I say. It always amazes me how you guys sit back, relax, look so chill with amazing challenges, supply chain challenges that just, I don't think have ever been experienced before with all those. Remember when the ship got stuck in the Suez Canal? And then things are stuck there, and then on this side, when they get you can't get your containers out of Transnet because it's not working properly, or they're on strike. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Nothing easy in this thing. Probably as we've been talking, the whole world's change when we get out of here. Craig, talking about a change world, we're into climate change. We're into low emissions. Your plans for the future, a lot of talk is on electric vehicles. I know you've had CNG that you've been testing here, and you plan to introduce that. What would your focus be? You have gone Euro 5 on selected models in your F-Series and N-Series, I think, in the N-Series or just F-Series. But anyway, you've gone Euro 5 and there's more plans for that. How are you looking? Let's say electric vehicles as a start, because that's the buzz.
Yeah, I think there's a different way of answering this question, Patrick. It's not all about electric vehicles at the end of the day. You heard me mentioned our strategy is driven by ESG, okay? The environment, the social responsibilities we have to undertake, the governance. So that drives where, the carbon neutrality everyone talks about by 2030, 20 in Europe, 2050 in other areas. So our strategy is an ESG strategy that works together with customers in resolving what their needs are.
Could I just, for those who haven't heard, it's a new buzzword that came about last year. In fact, I think I heard it, although it has been around a bit. But ESG is environment, society, and government.
Governance.
Governance. And that, just before you get on how you're doing it, just explain that. Environment, society, and governance.
Yeah, so environment has an impact on society. Okay, so it starts off, what are you doing about the environment, the carbon neutrality, emissions standards that have a positive or negative impact on the environment. Societies benefit or prejudice by what happens there, floods, the cycle of weather patterns. We're talking about the cost of society. We spoke a lot about, the basic needs of society, whether it's electricity, basic needs, etc. That requires a focus. So, and then governance is around all the things we're trying to fight against now. Ethical business.
Yeah.
Governance is such, it's actually the challenge. in this modern society around the world. Where are the ethics, and how do you drive it in the face of serious challenges to the contrary? So ESG, just a way to summarize these three areas and drive the focus. So how do you produce electric vehicles when you don't have power? Where's that going to come from? What do you do with the batteries? How does that impact society in the future with disposing of them or reusing them? So again, the strategy, we follow the principles of what do we need to do that drives a holistic ESG strategy. And that then comes back to the emissions. We unfortunately in this country don't have much of a policy other than Euro 2. That's our current status, where the world's at 5, 6, 7 or different technologies. So our strategy drives what the customers needs, and customers are driving the need, not policy anymore.
Okay.
So policy is Euro 2, but we introduced and we run Euro 3, but we've introduced Euro 5 because that in the ESG strategies contributing positively towards the the environment. Over and above that, your continuum up to electric or whatever else beyond, because there are other technologies other than just EV. So in this journey of what we represent, we're going down the continuum, what in the global world and what Isuzu addresses, what is the territory and what does that part of the world can afford to make a difference.
Yeah.
So in our side, as we said, in the current frame, we already introduced Euro 5's options across the board. That's also supplemented by some models we're introducing on N series now in the next few months around compressed natural gas, particularly here in the reef.
Which you've had on test quite a while, hey?
Yeah, we've been running test vehicles for nearly 12 years already.
Yeah.
And so we're quite familiar with what it can do and the relevance of it. And at the same time, dual fuel between running Euro 5 together with hydrogen supplements gets us around the range of where vehicles can operate in the current environment, which is affordable. Okay, electric vehicles is still something that will take time to get to critical mass and realistic economic affordabilities. But in the medium term, we'll have those solutions. But at the end of the day, on ESG, if you're just talking products, there will be a suite or a mix, particularly in our world, where we'll be able to select what is right for that customer. Whether it's here in South Africa or in the rest of Africa or any other continent, we'll be able to select something that's appropriate.
Right, so it's still, there's no sort of definite, we're going the electric vehicle route or we're going the CNG route. You've got all those on the table, but you're going to look at what's correct and applicable for South Africa and the customers in South Africa and the environment in which we operate trucks. Yeah, okay. Craig, coming to the end here, the sales, as I say, took me by surprise last year, but you're predicting a little bit downfall for this year and also for the year after, and then you're going up again in your predictions. I saw according to your charts. Are we looking for quite a big downfall next year? I think, what did you put it at? 29,500 for 2023, 30,000 up again, and then you back up to 30,500 in 2025.
Yeah.
This one's your biggest downfall this year. You're looking at.
So
a downfall, a drop.
Economic predictions, one thing you can be sure of, you won't get them right. Okay.
Okay.
But I think just if you look at the moment we're in now and the level of blackouts we have, up to 12 hours a day, and we can't be naive to the fact the again, we're talking about variables where we started this discussion, the impact of those variables on the environment this year. We don't have a textbook to quantify what those are. But to say that all things will be equal and consistently a carryover of last year, I don't think is realistic.
No.
Okay, it's not to be pessimistic. I think we're just trying to be realistic. And we're a resilient country, so we'll run with any benefits that are better than that. But I think we've got to go through, and maybe the correction of, more customers have replaced enough last year than what they need for now. Until we settle down with exchange rates, inflation, blackouts, the negativity, an election that's coming. It's
bad politics.
It's lots of noise. It's
Lots
just
of noise.
very noisy.
Yeah.
Is that good for business? It creates anxiety, and if we're going to be, we need to focus on what we do and what we do well to get through it, and we've got to navigate the challenges. But whether we go back 15 years, 10 years, or 5 years, the fundamental challenges have always been there. They just go to they get redefined at new levels.
There's a couple of big ones thrown in, unexpected ones. Like, it's interesting that you say this year, with the sales. A supermarket, Super Spar, on our way, spent, I think it was 260,000 Rand on keeping their 1 million Rand generator going, which is extra cost that they can't pass on to the consumer. It comes off their bottom line. And due to load shedding, there's a whole lot of extra costs that are going to add to people. So I think that's just one sort of area where that cash flow or that little reserve in businesses is going to be eroded in certain businesses. And in fact, the big retail outlets, to which you have your trucks operating in a lot, they have asked for some kind of rebate on the fuel levy because their generators are not running on the roads, but they are still affected by the price. They are not getting any reduction on the fuel levy. There's all things like that challenges. But Craig, one last thing to end on. It's well known that Isuzu Trucks owns UD Trucks. Are you seeing any benefit out of that? I know we're way down the feeding chain in terms of impacts of that. Are you seeing any benefits, or has it affected you at all at the moment? I'm thinking in terms of maybe even cross-pollination of technology and the new challenges, putting their heads together over there and coming here. Yeah, that's it. Is there, or are we pretty isolated from it still?
Look, I mean, many companies, irrespective of trucks, own each other, and they're competitive brands. At a very high level, there's a parent relationship. So in the case of this one particularly, we're competitors in certain areas in the marketplace, but very little actually, because where they play as a brand is very unique to the top end of the extra heavy markets, and we play at the bottom end, and that's our space.
Yeah,
and I think that's got to be efficient for the parent relationship. So our jobs are to make sure we're efficient at the brand levels, and the future will take care of itself as to how that evolves over time.
Yeah, I've seen it in the past where, Isuzu now owns UD Trucks 100%, but I think it was Hino and Scania had a technology agreement at one stage. As you say, there's a lot. Daimler, Traton Group, and I think Volvo are cooperating now on rollout of infrastructure of electrical power points. So there's a lot of this. So I think maybe we got a little bit carried away. I certainly did. When I heard Isuzu bought UD Trucks, I thought, what's going on here? It's actually quite common in this industry where that sort of thing is happening, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect you on the ground. Isuzu continues as it is, and I can only hope that you continue, and I plead with you to continue in the way you have in the past, Craig, because you've been a credit to this industry. Both you as a person, as a manager, and Isuzu as a company has been a credit to South Africa, a credit to the trucking industry. And really your endless optimism and ability to overcome challenges never ceases to amaze. And may God bless you on the road ahead. And thank you so much, Craig, for the time you've given us today.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for the wonderful chats over time.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.